A lot of the times at Toastmasters, the difference between a good and a bad meeting can be attributed back to the Toastmaster of the day. If the Toastmaster of the day is engaging, enthusiastic, entertaining, the entire vibe of the meeting can change, which is what makes this role so important in the first place. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. How to effectively play the role of the Toastmaster of the day. Hey, my name is Radeep and I'm the founder of Frantically Speaking, and I love learning about effective communications and sharing those learnings with you so that you can level up your communications game as well. So we're going to break this down into three parts. First is if you're nominated for the role of Toastmaster of the Day or TMOD, what do you need to do before the meeting to prep for that role? What do you need to do during the meeting, and what's the flow that a TMOD should follow? And lastly, we're going to go over some tips that can help us play this role a lot more effectively. Starting off with what needs to happen before the meeting. If you're nominated for this role, the very first thing we need to do is to pick a theme for the meeting. When it comes to choosing themes, there are no real rules over here. It's just that we should try to keep it either something that has potential to be entertaining and humorous, or something that's relevant, serious, and a topic that needs to be heard out. But most importantly, we need to make sure that the theme is inclusive. What I mean by that is that a Toastmasters audience is a lot of times very diverse. There are a lot of age groups from different backgrounds. So it's always good to have a theme that everyone has some understanding about, as opposed to something that's very niched or niched down. We have an entire list of themes that we're linking in the description below. Check them out. You can grab and use them for your meeting, or you can take inspiration from them to come up with your own theme. The next thing to do is to reach out to all the role players and the speakers and get a few details from them. What we're looking for is their name and the correct pronunciation of their name, what their speech topic is, what level of speech are they giving, and lastly, we can ask them a fun fact about them related to our theme. The reason we get all this information is so that when we're introducing the particular role players or the speakers, we have something to say about them that can make the introduction a lot more holistic. The next thing to do is to reach out to the Vice President of Education and get the final agenda, print it out, and take it for your meeting. It's pretty obvious why we do this. The TMOD is the one who moderates the entire meeting, so we need to have the final flow in place. One thing to keep in mind right before the meeting starts is to go over to the Vice President of Education and ask them if there are any last minute changes to the final agenda of the meeting. And the last thing to prepare for as the TMOD is the content. What are we actually going to be saying when we're hosting or moderating the entire meeting? Now, if you want a word-by-word script, we have one written out for you. You can download it. The link is in the description. But that is just a base script. If you stick to that, you'll be fine. You'll be playing a role properly, but it won't be very entertaining. The idea is to use your theme to make the entire content and your delivery a lot more engaging and entertaining. For example, I was attending this meeting where the theme was music. Pretty simple theme, but when the Toastmaster of the Day was called on stage, he didn't just come on and start with something like, "Good morning, how are you all doing today?" Nothing of that sort. He directly came on and started singing a song. And because most TMODs come on stage and start speaking, to have somebody like this who came up and showcased his talent from the get-go and did something different, it really gripped the crowd from the very beginning. And throughout the meeting, he continued to sing different songs. He engaged with the audience about their musical tastes. At one point, the entire crowd was also singing Hotel California. And it was all because the TMOD made sure that we were engaging with not just him, but with the entire theme of the meeting. That's a meeting I still remember till today, even though it was about 3 years back. Now, of course, if we can't sing, we don't need to necessarily do something along those lines, but it's important to craft out our content in a manner which constantly engages with the audience and makes them see something different happening on stage. Okay, now we'll move on to what to do during the meeting. We're going to go over the entire flow as the Toastmaster of the Day and how we need to perform all those roles step by step. So when we're called on stage, we'll most likely be introduced by the presiding officer of the meeting. A few things that we need to keep in mind as part of our introduction. But before all of that, we need to try to ensure that our beginning is gripping enough to warm up the audience. And this is important. As the TMOD, people are expecting a lot of energy from it. And if we come on stage and start with the same old introductions that people have already seen, it's not going to be that gripping enough. So we need to try and do something unique over here. This kind of circles back to the example of the guy who chose music as his theme, and he started his entire meeting by singing. Now, there are a lot more simpler techniques that we can use to make our introductions a lot more gripping. And I'm putting a link down in the description below, which has 15 examples of different types of speech introductions you can use and adapt them for your particular meeting. The next few things that we need to move on to is to introduce our theme and why we chose that theme, and then explain the structure of the entire meeting. The fact that this meeting will start off with the prepared speeches, move on to table topics, and end with the evaluation. Now, of course, every club might have a slightly different structure, so keep that in mind when you're addressing the structure of your particular meeting. If I'm playing the role of TMOD, one thing that I like to do is to find out how many guests are there in the audience by asking for a show of hands. If I see more than 60% or so of the audience are consistent of guests, I'll try and talk a little bit about the history of Toastmasters as well. Where it started, who it started, how long has this organization been around for, and the impact it's made on the world. I'm putting a link down in the description to the official TM website, which will give you a gist of the entire history of Toastmasters in case you want to incorporate this within your Toastmaster of the Day introduction as well. If you have the time, another thing that you can do is to call on a few guests and do a round of introductions with them. You can call on a couple of people who might be comfortable speaking in front of a crowd and ask them a few basic questions: what their name is, what their background is, and why did they decide to come for a Toastmasters meeting. This just helps the guests feel a lot more inclusive and comfortable in this new environment that they're in. Okay, and now the meeting kind of gets more into play. Now you have to start introducing the timer, our counter grammarian, let them speak about their roles a bit, and then we move on to the prepared speakers. One thing to keep in mind, whoever you're calling on stage, make sure you shake their hand before you depart the stage. It's a formal show of acknowledgement that the spotlight is now theirs, and it just looks a lot more professional. If you want to know how to make these micro introductions of your speakers and role players also a little interesting, we made a whole other video on how to introduce somebody, so check that out for some interesting ideas. Another thing to keep in mind when you're calling on speakers is to say their name and topic in a particular way. Toastmasters has this theme as to when you call on a speaker on stage, you shake their hand, you say their name followed by their topic, then you face the audience and you say the topic followed by the name. So this ensures that everybody has heard the name of the speaker as well as the topic that they're speaking about. And finally, we move on to the introductions of the general evaluator and the table topic master. And by this time, the role of the TMOD kind of calms down. Eventually, we move on to the prize distribution, which is usually conducted by the TMOD as well as the presiding officer. At least that's how it was done in the meetings I attended in the clubs around me. But make sure you speak to your VP to understand what the formal process of things like prize distribution are, because it can vary from club to club. Another thing to keep in mind is to know when the break of the meeting is scheduled to be. And as the TMOD of that particular meeting, you can accordingly adjust the pace based on how much time is left or how much time they're running out of. Finally, the last time you go on stage, try to end with some sort of a takeaway from your theme so you can end on a high note. Again, putting a link down in the description with 15 speech ending lines or examples that you can incorporate within your Toastmaster Day speech or any speech, frankly. Just make sure you use these lines as an inspiration and adapt them based on your particular situation. The entire checklist of the flow as to what you need to keep an eye out for and what you need to do as the TMOD is given down in the link below. It's a downloadable PDF, print it out, take it for a meeting if required. It'll help you to make sure that you're not missing out on any key points. And finally, here are some tips to keep in mind to play our role as efficiently as possible. Just 3 simple things to keep in mind here. Firstly, make sure that you have some pillars ready. As the TMOD, you're essentially the host of the meeting. In case there are some delays, technical errors, or anything like that, and the crowd needs to be entertained, you need to be the one to step up and engage the audience in some form or the other. A simple yet effective way to do this is to have a small box of chocolates with you and prepare a few fun questions around your theme. The idea is that if and when you feel a filler is needed, you can go on stage and start asking the audience these questions, and if anybody answers them correctly, you can throw a chocolate to them. This is a simple thing that I've seen happen in a lot of meetings and keeps the audience well entertained until the delay or the error is resolved. If you have any more creative ideas when it comes to fillers, please put them down in the comment below. We'd love to hear them. The second thing, which I'm kind of repeating again, as soon as you're nominated for this role, set the theme as early as possible. A lot of the times, the people who are organizing the meeting might want to make some sort of a creative or a design around it, and they can personalize that design and their PR material a lot better if they have the theme in advance. And a lot of your content is also going to depend on your theme, so it's best to set it as soon as possible. And lastly, I know there's quite a lot of preparation that goes into this role, but do not forget to practice and run by your entire flow by your mentor, especially if you're performing this role for the first time. There are a lot of simple things that can be weeded out if you just run your entire script by a senior Toastmaster member. And that's about it. If you have any more questions when it comes to Toastmasters, communications, or public speaking, we have an entire website with in-depth articles and resources dedicated just for that. So go check out franticallyspeaking.com.